you look at the creative work that's coming out of Iran in particular, the artists that work in there, you see that it is a very youthful resurgence or a real outburst of creativity, and you can feel that there is some kind of change in the air. Half the country is actually below 30, so it's not the same country that it was at the time of the revolution in '79. So in that sense, I think it is fair to say that the artists are kind of foreshadowing or sort of anticipating or maybe even initiating a certain change that is happening, and everybody could witness what happened in the aftermath of the election.
So basically, I wanted to divide the exhibition into different sections in order to relate to the different themes. And the first section we're in now is called In Search of the Axis of Evil. And the first artist is called Ali Reza Ganchi. He lives in Berlin, and he did 3 series, and I chose 2 images from each series where we're juxtaposing a head next to a hand. And the whole idea is that the head is a reflection of will, of intent, and the hand is a reflection of execution. So the question is, who is behind this vilifying of a nation and labeling it as the axis of evil? Right next to this work, we have a painting by an artist from the inside. His name is Behrang Samad Sadegan, and the painting is actually very interesting in terms of how it relates to the work of Ali Reza Ganchi, because you also have heads and you have hands. And this is a reflection of the war in Iraq, the US-Iraq situation. The hands are blood-drenched, but the heads, interestingly enough, have been cropped. So again, who is responsible for these acts of aggression that have been taking place? We are searching for the axis of evil. We move forward, and in this case, we're looking at an artist from the inside. And in a way, the artists on the inside also are trying to criticize some of the things that they perceive as evil or unacceptable because of the oppression or the limitation of freedom or censorship. So this is an artist called Behdad Lahuti, and he created this artwork, which a lot of people think of as the Duchamp of the Middle East. And this is a traditional Iranian toilet, and he covered it with slogans that reflect on the promises that the current regime has given to the younger generation, such as cheaper housing, better education. And he's saying all these promises have actually gone down the toilet. Nothing has manifested into reality. So there's a lot of frustration on the inside. So now we are standing in front of a very controversial piece in the show. This is a painting by an artist who lives in New York. His name is Niki Nujumi. And it shows in a very interesting and controversial way the complicity that exists between the West and the East, between probably the US and Iran, although on the surface they are supposedly very polarized. So if you look at the figures of the Western man and the religious cleric, they are both cropped into 2 halves, and the same colors have been used to paint these 2 individuals, saying that they have a lot in common. They're both wearing masks, which is an evidence or a metaphor for deceit. So there's a lot going on in there that shows that the hidden agenda of these 2 nations might not be so different than what we are led to think. Right next to this work, we have an amazing work that is very intelligent because of the different references that it refers to. It's by Sarah Rahbar, who lives in the US but keeps on going back and forth to Iran. It's an American flag, obviously, with the map of the Middle East. And then in Nastaliq Farsi, she writes how love has blinded us one more time. And it's really very much about the love-hate relationship, this twisted love affair that exists between the US and Middle East at large. So now we are in the second section of the exhibition, and the title of the section is From Iran to Queeran and Everything in Between. So obviously it's about notions of masculinity, femininity, gender, and sexuality. And these are 2 series by an amazing photographer who lives inside Iran. His name is Abbas Kosari. And one of them shows the Iranian bodybuilding champions, and the other one is about the police women's squad. And I thought it's amazing to see this kind of controversial depiction of masculinity and femininity, where the men seem to be far more engrossed with their physique and their bodies, which in the Middle East is not usually considered a very masculine thing. Whereas for the women, they are completely ridden of their femininity. They're doing these action hero things, shooting from windows, abseiling on buildings. And I thought it really sheds a different light even on the chador, that these women are not really oppressed, unlike what the Western world sometimes like to think. They seem to be very empowered, and they're really moving upwards socially because of the situation that they are in. Right next to this work, we have another series by a photojournalist Her name is Nusha Tavakolyan, and it's called Maria. And the series follows the life of a transvestite who lives in Iran, who starts off as a truck driver, as we see here in this photograph, and then eventually ends up as a coffee shop attendant. And what I was very, very surprised to know while looking at this work and doing further research is that in Iran, every year since Khomeini's times, the government issues 6,000 sex change permits that are subsidized by the government and are lawful under the Sharia Shiite Ijtihad law. So I think this sheds a lot of different light on the whole notions of sexuality and sexual lifestyles that are accepted or not accepted within the Islamic Republic. So now we're in the third section of the exhibition. It's called Iran Recycled from Vintage to Vogue. And I'm standing in front of one of my personal favorites in the exhibit. It's a series by an artist who lives on the inside. His name is Siamak Filizadeh. He's a graphic designer, and he did this series based on a very, very important traditional work of literature in Iranian culture. It's called the Shahnameh, the Book of Kings, which is a telling of the stories of all the kings and rulers of Iran since pre-Islamic times up until probably the 19th century. So he took the Shahnameh and he concentrated on a very, very interesting figure who's like the Superman or the cultural hero of folk kind of culture. His name is Rustam, so you can see the R, the logo, covering the Superman logo. And he's infused him with such a kind of pop, kitschy kind of feel with the D&G fake belt and the katyushas and the bazookas. And then you have Spider-Man seeking revenge for another character that was killed by Rustam. So it becomes hilarious, yet the backgrounds are literally ripped out from the traditional illustrated manuscripts that you find in the Safavid period, the Qajar period. This is a work of literature that was written by Ferdowsi since the 11th or 12th century. So we're really, really looking at a very historical, serious piece of literature that has become so hilarious, so funny, so pop-oriented, and I simply love it. Right next to me here, we have an amazing painting of a huge scale by an artist who lives on the inside. His name is Ahmed Murshedlu, and it's of a man lying in his bed, more like a teenager, and that's why I wanted to be on ground level to kind of give the idea that he is really lying on his bed. And right on top of it, there's this amazing installation by an artist who lives in Berlin. His name is Shahram Intikhabi, who since 2002 has been collecting real prostitute cards and covering them with a chador, saying that the complete revealing of a woman or the complete covering of a woman is really the same thing because you are looking at the woman as a sex object. Now, by juxtaposing the two works at such close proximity, I wanted to kind of make a joke and say that probably inside the country, even a man's fantasies have been confiscated and they've been covered. So that was just a little curatorial interjection on my behalf.